Welcome to Deck Analysis and Testing. Today we're back again with a no-gem deck, and it's probably the most degenerate no-gem deck that you have ever seen, aside from maybe the no-gem FTK deck that I did a while ago. It is AMANO Stun. If you don't know what AMANO does, we will go over that card in a minute. Basically, what this deck aims to do is to have AMANO stay on our field and abuse this skill that basically prevents AMANO from activating its downside, and just have it stay on our field forever and just stop our opponent from playing the game. Okay, let's actually have a look at what it does now. AMANO Iwato is a spirit monster which bounces itself back during the end phase, and it has a really strong effect of having both players and monsters not being able to activate their effects. Except for spirit monsters, otherwise it would negate its own effect. But basically, how this card is intended to be played is that you can normal summon it during your own turn, and stop monsters during your own turn, and when you end your turn, this card bounces itself back to your hand, and your opponent will be free to do whatever they want during their own turn. But the Spirit Monster Bounce effect is actually an activated effect, which can be prevented if you have the right cards or skill in this scenario. For example, the skill that we are using is Smile Wheel. This is a really bad skill, but it has some unintended synergies with Spirit Monsters, especially with AMANO Iwato. It says add one Smile Word from outside your deck to your hand, but if you activate the skill, you can only activate or use the effect of Smile, Spell, or Trap cards until the end of your opponent's next turn. Notice it says that you can only activate or use the effect of that Smile card that you just added, basically, and you cannot use any other effects until the end of your opponent's next turn, which includes AMANO Iwato's self-bouncing effect. That is an activated effect which will be prevented with your skill, but its on-field continuous effect, the one that prevents both players from activating monster effects, that's not an activated effect which will not be prevented with your skill. So what this basically does is that as soon as you have Iwato on field and then you activate your skill, AMANO Iwato will stay on your field and still retain its effect that stops your opponent from activating their own monster effects, which is crazy. It's basically a skill drain that's even better because it prevents your opponents from activating monster effects from anywhere, including your opponent's hand, graveyard, banished. Just any monster effects are completely prevented. They can't even activate it. It's not like skill drain where you can still activate it but it gets negated. You straight up cannot activate their effects, which is crazy. So we are playing a bunch of draw spells and monsters to help us draw into AMANO Iwato, and a lot of them are free to obtain, which makes this no-gem deck possible. We have the recently released Pendulum monster that allows us to pop itself to draw a card, and also it's a free summon which helps us clear up the board when we have the lock established, and it helps us just have more monsters on field to deal enough damage for lethal. And we have Reload and Magical Mallet for basically the same purpose, to reshuffle our hand to draw AMANO Iwato, hopefully. And for the rest of the deck, it's just trap monsters because we just need more damage on board. And also we need a plan B in case Iwato gets destroyed or gets flipped face down with a Book of Moon. As you can probably tell, this combo is not invincible. It's really easy to out for most meta decks, because most meta decks play Book of Moon, and Book of Moon just outs this card completely. And because we're playing a no-gem deck, we can't really play stuff like lands to prevent that from happening. So we're just gonna basically hope that we go first and hope that our opponent doesn't have an out to AMANO Iwato. But even if they do, we still have plan B, a second win condition, which is basically our trap monsters. We have 3 copies of Zometa Spirit, which deals some effect damage if your opponent attacks it with their own monster. We have a Statue of Anguish Pattern, which is a trap monster that has a lot of defense and cannot be targeted if you have another trap monster, and also is a pretty useful card removal just by summoning other trap monsters, which will trigger its pop effect. And just 2 extra trap monsters to fill in the remaining empty slots of our deck. We're playing Swamp Mirror because it has a pretty high attack value compared to other trap monsters. We're not playing an extra deck because, first of all, we don't really need any, and also we need an empty extra deck to actually use the effect of our level 5 Pendulum, so we won't be playing any extra deck at all. Usually in decks like these, I still like to play random synchro monsters like Shooting Star Dragon or Stardust Majestic Star Dragon, stuff like that, but for this deck I can't really play those because of the Pendulum monster that we are including in our deck. This deck is not good, it's really inconsistent, it loses most of the time going second if your opponent has any sort of interruption, it loses going first if your opponent has a Book of Moon or some kind of out to discard. They can just, attack over it if they have enough attack. And also the problem is that a lot of modern skills let you normal summon high level monsters without tributing anyway. So, they can just normal summon a Neos and just attack over your Iwato and you just win the game like that. But it's still pretty funny if it matches against the right deck. Some decks just straight up do not have an out to this, or they really needed to draw the out that is in their deck. Maybe they're only playing 3 copies of Book of Moon in their entire deck, and that's like the only card that stops it. So as long as your opponent doesn't draw it in their turn, you could pretty much win pretty easily. It's a pretty polarizing deck, and you either win hard or you lose hard. Okay, in our first replay, you will be able to see one of the decks that AMANO Iwato is just really good against, and it is Ra. We don't actually have Iwato in hand yet, but we still have a free draw from our Pendulum, and we still don't draw AMANO Iwato, and this showcases some ways that you can still play if you don't open with Iwato turn 1, because we still have the trap monsters, and those are still not bad. Our opponent will be using Endymion to cycle through their deck and then activate their search spell to grab themselves a Ra and then activate Millennium Revelation. That's the 2-card combo that gets them into Immortal Phoenix, which would usually win them the game, but because of how the trap monsters work and how we could just special summon them from our back row whenever we want to, we can just body block our opponents with the trap monsters that we have. And also, the 2 trap monsters we have are Zoma the Spirit, and if he attacks one of them with the Immortal Phoenix, he takes 2000 damage. As you can see, he takes half of the damage of Immortal Phoenix, which is 2000. So it's really risky for him to actually attack us in an empty board, but we drew the Iwato, so we pretty much won. And he can't use the effect of Sphere Mode to tag into the normal Ra because we have the Iwato on field. And even if he tries to revive the normal Ra doesn't really have any effects because you can't activate effects. And if he sends the Ra to the graveyard, he can't revive the Immortal Phoenix because that's another monster effect. So during the end phase, his skill banishes the ball that is on his field, and we're just free to attack. And before we can even attack, our opponent is just going to scoop. Okay, in our second game, we are going first, which is really nice if we draw AMANO Iwato, which we do. Our opponent is playing Constellas, which is probably the best deck in the meta, or if not, it's really popular, so let's see what we can do. We will set 2 and end turn with 1 AMANO Iwato and 1 of our Pendulums. Our opponent will be normal summoning the Slumber, which doesn't really do anything because he can't use the effect. We will draw a couple of cards and draw into some of our trap monsters. I won't attack with my Iwato because I could sense the delay when I entered the damage step when he activated the lands, so I figured that that's probably another copy of lands, so I won't, attack into my opponent's monster and have it destroyed. So instead, I'm just gonna wait a turn and pop my opponent's stuff with my trap monsters. And as you can see, even though he activated the effect of Omega, which prevents his monsters from being affected by spell or traps, because the trap monsters are monster effects, we can still actually bypass the protection of Omega. Opponent will chain lands, which again doesn't really help because it's a monster effect now that it's a monster. So even with AMANO Iwato gone, we still have the game on our favor because of the amount of trap monsters that we have, and that showcases yet another way that you can still win even if AMANO Iwato is gotten rid of from your field.